Hey everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to attempt to dye some 100% acrylic yarn using Rit DyeMore synthetic. Now, I've done this before in a few previous videos, but today I want to try to have fun and apply the dyes with a low immersion situation. I want to see if I can sort of randomly apply these colors to the yarn. How much will they spread? How will they set? How will the acrylic come out in the end? These are all questions that I hope to answer. Today's video is sponsored by Victoria. Thank you so much for sponsoring this video and requesting that I play more with acrylic yarn. If you want to learn more about how you can sponsor an episode of Dyepot Weekly, you can find a link to the listing in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop that has all of the details in the video description and iCard. Today I will be dyeing 200 grams of this Studio Classic by Nicole acrylic yarn. This yarn is 100% acrylic, but I do not want to dye it in the ball form. I'm actually going to go wind this 200 gram ball into two different 100 gram skeins. This will give us a little more surface area to work with than if I were to just go and make one 200 gram large skein. It'll allow me to spread things out a little bit more, so I think that that will be helpful. But I'm going to go wind it up and then we can get ready to get started. The biggest concern that I have with dyeing acrylic-based yarns is that the acrylic does melt a little bit. It doesn't require a ton of heat for that melting to happen, but it is still knittable, and I know there are a lot of you who might be vegan or allergic to wool and want some non-cotton options for your dyeing adventures. In this 4-inch deep full-size catering steam pan, I have 8 cups of water. And now I'm going to add our 200 grams of pre-soaked yarn. I'm applying this in a way such that the skeins go around like this instead of like that, which should help a bit with even color coverage. I also put on these removable nylon zip ties because it looks like the ends that I tied around will likely potentially come undone. Now, we're not really in a low immersion situation. There's plenty of water if I push my hands down, but there is a possibility that we will minimize color spread in this situation. In the past, I've done hand painting with multiple colors, but we're gonna go dilute the dyes a bit so that way we can layer them here low immersion. For this project, we are going to use Rit DyeMore synthetic dye in royal purple and peacock green. After shaking the dyes thoroughly, I'm going to dilute them at a ratio of 1 tablespoon of the dye per cup of water. I don't want to add too much dye to the dye bath because the more dye we add, the more likely it is, I guess, that these colors will combine, which is not what we want. But also, the more dye we add, the more washing we might have on the other side, which is also not what we want. And so I mixed 2 cups of the green mixture, 1 cup of the purple mixture. I'm going to stir these up, and then I will be adding this to some squeeze bottles as needed to apply the color to our yarn to hopefully end up with something that feels fairly floral. I just turned on the heat to medium, which will reduce once we start seeing some movement on the surface. Note that the instructions indicate you need to use a stovetop method for dyeing acrylic yarns. You do need heat to set the color, and so this isn't recommended to do on fabrics that recommend cold wash and things like that. I also want to note that all of the equipment that I'm using today is dedicated for yarn dyeing and is not used for food. The steam pan is on my gas stove over 2 burners, so the heat is a little uneven in here, especially when crowded, but if you move the yarn around a bit, you can help move out the color. Now I'm now going to reduce the heat to low. It seems like, and I don't really have a thermometer here, that the ideal temperature is between like 185 and 215. But let's start adding on some color. I am really curious what kind of spread we might see, how far this might penetrate, but I really want to play with something that is a favorite technique of mine, and it is this random application of color on yarn. And normally I would keep going with acid dyes, but I am curious. I'm curious about the spread. I do see a bit of spread. Let me add some color down here, and let's now take the spoon to just see. Okay, so this is not striking super fast, which is cool. I think that we might be able to get some of this mottled striping stuff to stay, potentially, but this is sit here just as long since I've applied it, and let's see. Okay, so it's not striking super fast. I wonder if there's going to be any evidence left of those lines. Currently, there is not. I've been able to sort of distribute that color. Now, I am curious. Okay, so let's do another section that is less soft. Let's put some lines back over on all of these, and let's wait a bit because I'm curious what the spread will be like. If we will still see these sharp lines in, say, 10 minutes, or if they'll spread sort of like when I moved the dye around. And this will help me inform how I want to proceed with the technique. Now, I see a little bit of steam. The heat is not super high. Yeah, it's hot. I mean, I can touch it, but yeah, I am intrigued. Okay, let's go ahead and wait 10 minutes and then come back and see if it still looks the same. I came back in only 2 minutes and 50 seconds because, as you can see, those colors have spread out. This is good. It tells me a little bit about how I might want to proceed. I'm going a little heavier in with the purple, sort of spraying a bit more, but I'm really liking the way that these colors are combining together. The green is definitely looking more mint, which maybe I remember from the last time I did this, but yeah, I am excited. And let's add a fair amount down at the end. So the colors are not going to have like a full-on repeating kind of colorway. There could be some pooling, but there will be some randomness to it. I think one key is going to be slightly adding the colors in ways that they don't necessarily mix with one another where I've added them. But we'll see. Of course, now I'm adding some colors on now, so we will see how this goes. Just sort of filling this in. I don't mind if there is some white left behind at all, but yeah, I'm excited to see where this will go. So this time, and I've used maybe around a full one of these squirt bottles of each color on the yarn so far. And we are definitely going to have to flip it and add color to the other side. I'm not sure how deep this color is penetrating yet, but now I am legitimately going to wait 10 minutes. Maybe I'll turn up the heat for a little while. We'll wait 10 minutes, see how much of the color has absorbed, and try to get a sense of if we can flip it yet or if we need to wait even longer. Note that the instructions say to wait 30 minutes for the color to bind, but the instructions are more for over dyeing like a garment, and so to help you get like a lot of coloration, an even color on a garment like that versus dyeing yarn. So let's see. After a minute, it's actually looking really cool. Very different. The colors have absolutely spread, but it's cool. I'm really excited to see how this turns out. I should also note that I did pre-soak the yarn overnight before starting to film this video. Okay, I let the heat get too high. It was bubbling and, well, we got some color spread. It has only been 7.5 minutes and I just reduced the heat back to low, and you can see some different colors in here with the greens, and I still plan to flip it and add some other color to the other side, but you can see how much more these colors have spread. Potentially, if I kept the water volume a lot lower, then we might have been able to preserve some of these different sections of color. But if we check in right now, you can just see, I mean, I might not be able to flip this because I don't know if this color is really going in at all yet. So let's go ahead and wait for 20 minutes. All the color isn't necessarily going to absorb, but it could. It could absorb. So let's go ahead and we'll wait for, actually, let's go ahead. The colors layering on top of each other are pretty nice. Let's just add some green. It'll spread, we know it'll spread, but let's just go ahead and do that. And we are gonna wait, as I said, 20 minutes, and then come see how much of this purple is left, and to determine what we want to do next. I think this color is really pretty. There is definitely dye in here. Ooh, we do have, I mean, there's definitely color penetration. I'm a little at a loss. I think I'm going to crank the heat up a little bit more. I mean, again, we're not expecting everything to dissolve. Okay, just briefly, and put it back on low. I think I'm actually going to turn off the heat and leave this in here to cool off completely. We have only used a fraction of the dye that we mixed, but as you can see, while we have some tonal differences in here, this is not the best dye for a low immersion. Well, we're not even low immersion, but it doesn't strike fast enough for like a medium immersion kind of technique. So we did learn something, and the yarn is pretty. Just, you know, what I was trying didn't work. Time for some midpoint thoughts before we get to the washing, which I know we all want to see how much color stays behind. But I think if you want a variegated colorway on acrylic yarn, which is possible, it would be best to hand paint it on your yarn, wrap it up in some plastic wrap, and steam it in a dedicated dye steamer. We tried that before and that worked. I was even able to do some speckles. It is technically possible that the dye is old. I did use these within the last couple months when I filmed the previous video, but the purple I've had for longer. Back in like one of the first episodes of Dyepot Weekly, when I first tried using the Rit DyeMore synthetic dye. I'm not sure if it goes bad over time. It is mixed in liquid, but that is something to keep in mind. Victoria, I really appreciate this request to play with acrylic yarn again, and there are definitely other techniques that I really want to try to see how they work with acrylic yarn and playing with other synthetics. So if there's a technique you guys would like to see me try, please let me know down in the comments below. The total amount of dye that we use today is about half of a tablespoon of each color on the 200 grams of yarn, meaning there's about a half tablespoon of dye total per 100 grams. Fingers crossed that the washing will go well, but I am going to let this cool slowly. It'll hang out in the pan for a couple of hours before we go ahead and try washing it. Hours later, we have this beautiful dusty purple that hopefully has some tones that will remain, but we do need to go wash the yarn, and there is absolutely some color left behind. Oh, bummer. Bummer. I mean, I'm sorry. I tried. I really tried. I think, actually, it is pretty. It is really pretty. I don't really see any green. Oh, maybe a hint of it. It almost feels more gray. But we'll see how much. Oh! Oh! There's some of that green coming back. Oh, okay. You can barely see it on camera, but it seems like there's just some stuff that dye that might not be active because, ooh, this brought some new life back into it. Maybe I needed to give this a little more credit, and the colors were sort of striking where we put them, but that there was a lot of stuff that needed to be rinsed out that was spreading. Interesting. Because, I mean, the colors are still really subtle, but we've got some white again. Oh, cool. Okay, I am a lot more excited. We've got this lavender, green, and white kind of colorway. Like, I like the dusty color, but it was so different from what my initial goal was that, I mean, I'll admit, I was bummed. But the thankful thing is look how much less color is rinsing out already. I am using warm water right now, and I'm about to add some dish soap into here. But I'm actually encouraged and I'm happy. So this means that it could work. You can get a variegated yarn. You just might not quite know what it's gonna look like. So maybe you need to add the colors sort of like early and fast. And then like they'll spread, but whatever spread out didn't strike. Like those greens struck. So anyway, I'm gonna keep washing. I'm gonna rinse out all the soap now. I put a lot of soap in here. And I'll check back in to see what our bleeding situation is like. But honestly, I'm really, really optimistic right now. All right. I love a wash when I'm not aggravated at the end. I am pumped. I am happy. I thought I was going to be sad to have the color go and for it to feel pastel, but I love the pastel that's left behind, and it kind of worked. It kind of worked. Oh man. Okay, anyway, our water is clear. That really did not take very long. The hardest part actually was rinsing out all the soap. I used a lot, and this yarn is pretty absorbent. So it was more getting the soap out than getting the dye out. But anyway, I'm now gonna go put this through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and we'll come back and look. But honestly, it might be a little melted, but the yarn looks good. The color is good. Oh, I'm relieved. Victoria, I am so excited that this worked. More pastel than maybe what I was going for, but maybe next time I shouldn't dilute the dyes as much, or I shouldn't layer them on slowly and faster more at the beginning before they spread. Really, it was the purple that was spreading, so yeah, who knows, but it worked. Would I try this technique on acrylic again in the future? Maybe with some changes. I would be much more inclined to hand paint and then steam. I think then even with like the rinsing that probably will happen, you are more likely to get the colors where you want them. And you can layer the colors on the countertop all over in like a random fun crisscrossy kind of way. You don't have to do like regular repeats of color. So that might be the best bet for getting a variegated acrylic yarn, but this was fun. I was nervous, but the reveal was awesome. So it's kind of like a nice surprise. So yeah, let me know what kind of other acrylic techniques I should try out in the future. The colors are definitely pastel. I could have gone bigger, but I was afraid of the rinsing, and the rinsing was no problem. Sure, there was some bleeding, but like it just took a couple of rinses. Not bad at all. So now I'll wait until tomorrow or the next day when the yarn is dry, and we'll come back and see what the finished yarn looks like. Ooh, Victoria, this is really pretty. We are definitely a little more pastel than what I had envisioned. But you can see we've got at least 4 hues. There's some white, we've got lavender, this mint green, and then there's even this sort of gray where the 2 colors combined. I think that it's so pretty, and there's absolutely something in the purple that isn't binding to yarn because it's just washing out and sort of spreading. So I definitely will need to play with this more in the future. And now that I know this kind of spread happens, but the color is kind of striking where I put it, that means I can go about it again. Now certainly there's some spread. We were adding the color in sort of lines with the squeeze bottles, and we've got bigger, softer patches of color here. But, oh, I really like it. Victoria, thank you so much for sponsoring this video. I really, really hope that you're gonna love this yarn. And I definitely wanna play around more with synthetic options in the future. I also wanna say this yarn is so staticky right now. As I'm picking it up, it is just sticking to me. Oh, see, it's like, there we go. It's like floating and flying almost. Texture-wise, we definitely have some melting. When I zoom in, you can see that there is a little unevenness to some of the twist, but there are definitely some areas where it looks flattened a bit, but there's a lot of area that looks okay as well. So this yarn held up pretty well, I'd say. As for other synthetic dyes, I have some jacquard dye poly that I really want to play around with. And I would have actually used that in this video, except when I flip the packages over, it actually says it's recommended for 100% polyester. And acrylic was not mentioned on the label. So I decided to go back to something that I knew would work on acrylic. Even if I think that the Rit synthetic DyeMore dye did work a little better on the polyester in the previous video that I did looking at both. But it worked. I shouldn't have diluted it as much, but once everything spread, I didn't necessarily want to add too much more, and I'm glad I didn't, because I think we learned a lot right now. And yeah, again, I'm excited to play more in the future. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you want to see me play around more with different tying techniques and materials, make sure you subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. I release new videos every Tuesday and Friday morning, and make sure you press that bell icon so you get notifications and you don't miss any of it. If you would like to help support the content that you see in these videos, there are a few ways you could do that. I have a Patreon and an Etsy shop. You can find links to everything in the video description of all of my videos. These colors are absolutely beautiful, if muted and a little pastel, but I think that this yarn is really fun and is going to have that hand-dyed quality to it that often you don't really get with synthetic yarns. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.